In our previous lesson, we went ahead and wrote code that represented our first zero-touch node. We haven't compiled it, we haven't done anything else to it yet. That lesson was short on purpose because compiling our code takes a little bit more effort and we didn't want that lesson to be super long. So in this lesson, we're going to cover the build process and the output structure of our code. We're also going to look at modifying a few things as we see them show up in Dynamo. That's where this is going to come into play, and we're going to learn what some of these settings mean in our code in Visual Studio. So let's go ahead and jump right back into that project. All right, so once again, we are in Visual Studio in our first node and our zero-touch unraveled code. If you don't have it open, go ahead and get it open once again. And if you don't have the code, the link below is to the previous lesson for you to be able to catch up. We do have the myfirstnode.cs open and all those good things. I'll go ahead and hit save. And if you haven't already done this, go ahead and sync this code to GitHub. Looks like I haven't, so I need to get this synced. That way it's backed up. So we'll do create hello world node. We'll click on commit all and push, and this syncs it to the cloud for me, and I'm good to go. So that now has backed up my code for me, which is really exciting. So within Visual Studio, I just have Solution Explorer open, and we have one node from line 12 to 14, 12 to 15 really, that will return a string of hello world. How do I get this in Dynamo, you might ask? So what we're going to go ahead and do is click on build. I tend to do rebuild. Build will work as well. Rebuild happens to work if you build multiple times and you made minimal changes. So out of habit, I always do rebuild, but we'll do build for now. And we will see that it is running, and we see build succeeded on the lower left-hand portion of our screen. A quick way to get to our code is we right-click on our zero-touch unraveled icon in the Solution Explorer, and we will say Open Folder in File Explorer. In this case, we see zero-touch unraveled. We'll navigate to bin, debug, and we have a DLL. DLLs are where all of the action happens for zero-touch nodes for Dynamo. This is what you get imported into Dynamo to create nodes. Specifically, every method that starts with public static becomes a node in Dynamo. Pretty cool stuff. So the more of those you see, the more nodes you're going to have. In this case, we see that this is in a folder called debug, and that's because we have debug selected for our build process within Visual Studio. For now, that's okay. Debug's a good way to go. As we get a little further along in our lessons, we will switch this to release. That way it cleans up our code and optimizes it for us. For now, debug will work just fine, and that comes along with another file called pdb, and it's a debug file that you can also help with debug actions. So we'll just leave that alone for now as well, and we'll see that we have this in here. I'm going to go ahead and click in my browser here in my little dialog and copy this path with Control-C on my keyboard. In this case, we are going to go ahead and open Dynamo 2.19, which we installed in a previous lesson. If you didn't install it, once again, get Dynamo Core Runtime installed. That is in a previous lesson, and we are using all these things now. So let's go ahead and open up Dynamo Sandbox. In my case, it is pinned here on my taskbar, so I am opening that one at this time. And we get Dynamo launched. So there we go. We'll click on new just to start a new blank Dynamo graph, and it looks like what we're always familiar with. Nothing big's changed in here. What we are going to do is, for now, we're going to import this code. This little plus sign down here on add-ons isn't just for show. It helps us import code into the Dynamo environment. So if we click on that plus sign, we will see that we can load library files, either a .dll or a .ds file. .ds files are a little strange. They're Dynamo files that you can load that create things as well. They're not very common and not very widely known. I'll try to include a link for some resources on them from the Dynamo team, because not a lot of people use them. In our case, DLL is what we're really excited about and what we're using in this course. If we paste that path for our debug folder into the file name dialog and hit enter, it takes us to that folder. From here, we can click on zero-touch unraveled.dll and click on open. Very quickly, we'll notice that in the add-ons folder, we now have zero-touch unraveled as a heading or top category, and we have a subcategory of my first node. We have my first node as an action or a creation, nodes that create data, and then we have hello world as an action. If we click on my first node, this one's just kind of nothing. This node doesn't really make a lot of sense right now. So let's go ahead and just place that to the side and see what hello world does now. Placing hello world, we will see that it says hello world and we're good to go. So that's already our first node created. We actually created 2 nodes by accident. Why did that happen? Let's go ahead and jump back into Visual Studio and I'll show you why that happened. So within this class, we have public class my first node. This little section right here, public my first node on line 11, that's something that's required in C#. I won't go into all the details of why that's required, but we do need to expose the class to Dynamo. The downside is it does create a node for the class itself, which is kind of weird. So the easiest way to handle this in Dynamo with C# is to change this to private. Private my first node, parentheses, curly braces. All that's doing is telling Dynamo when it imports our DLL that this whole class isn't a node. So that's one thing that we do want to do. You don't want to make anything else private because it won't appear in Dynamo, but this hides that overall class for us. Our public static string hello world will still be public, which is pretty cool. So we'll go ahead and do that, and we'll go to build solution, and we'll see that it says build started. Right now it's kind of chugging and it's just saying build started and we don't really know what's happening. So it's still thinking. The problem right now is it can't copy the file because it's being used by another process. We still have Dynamo open. So with Dynamo open, it now owns that DLL and we can't change it at this time, which is a little frustrating and a little hard to deal with whenever you're compiling stuff and debugging it. So all we need to do is close Dynamo. I'll go ahead and click on no. We'll jump back to Visual Studio, and if we go to build solution, it will now build, and we'll see build succeeded in the bottom corner of Visual Studio. Jumping right back into Dynamo now, we will see Dynamo loading and loading all of our libraries. It will automatically load our DLL now because we have told Dynamo to always load that. So for our development process, loading a DLL this way is probably the easiest way. We're going to click on new and we will see zero touch unraveled. We'll expand that, my first node, hello world. We've now hidden that blank node that does nothing, which is pretty cool. Placing this node, we will see that it's my first node, hello world. Pretty nice stuff. Right now it doesn't have any inputs or outputs and it just outputs hello world. So a pretty simple node, but if this is the first time that you've made a C# node, that is your first C# node. A few lines of code and you're already making nodes in Dynamo. You can even start to mess with this a bit more and add other portions of strings in here. So if we were to do plus, we do like datetime.now or something, it will return the date and time at the end of hello world. So in Visual Studio, you can start to type in other methods and classes and it will predict it for you as well. So if we were to close Dynamo here, we'll click no. We'll go to build solution. It says build succeeded in the lower left-hand corner of Visual Studio. Opening Dynamo, it'll load. Dynamo takes a little bit to load, so this process does get a little clunky. We'll look at ways to reload this faster in a later lesson. Click on Launch Dynamo. We'll go to New, Zero Touch Unraveled, My First Node, Hello World. You will see that it's outputting the date and time that you have on that node as well. So now we're changing our first node, really cool. I encourage you after this lesson to mess with that some more, add a few other things. At the end of your experimentation though, we do want to go ahead and leave that node just as Hello World, but feel free to mess with it. I encourage you to use GitHub to sync those changes as you make them because each one of those will have a snapshot as well. So I'm just going to put in compile, commit all and push, and my code is now backed up. Really important to do that. One thing that we will notice in Dynamo is if we hover on our node, it just says original node name and description is blank. There is no description of this node at this time. There's also no input and there's only one output. Those are things that we need to add to our code to make those appear. So in our next lesson, we are going to cover some of that. So with that in mind, in our next lesson, we are going to cover adding descriptions to our nodes and recompiling that code. In this lesson, you learned how to make your first zero-touch node compilable and loadable in Dynamo, which is really awesome. And hopefully you've experimented a bit and added some more strings to your output. So with that in mind, we will see you in our next lesson as we add descriptions to this node.